Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. There was no Formula One this week, but there was plenty of racing action even from across the world. But we're going to start off, Tiff, with some news. So before we go on to NASCAR, Moto GP and Formula E as well, amongst other things, we're going to start off with a bit of news and gossip. And I'm going to start off and
You love a bit of gossip. You love a bit of gossip. What have you dug up? What have you dug up this week?
Especially when it's concerning Max Verstappen. I do like a bit of gossip. Let me ask you a question. Would you buy Max Verstappen branded clothing?
And if it was discreet and I liked the clothing, I might well purchase an item, yes.
Well, tough luck, because you can't, because he launched his own clothing brand called MaxOne, and Nike, who have a very similar brand named Air Max, a little bit more famous than MaxOne, perhaps, they've poo-pooed it. So it's going through the courts at the moment. So
I hate all it. That poor Mr. McDonald up in his little tea shop in Glasgow or something wasn't allowed to call his tea shop McDonald's. All this ownership of names, I can't stand that. I'm going to vote for Max to have his branding.
So you think Max is big enough and rich enough already?
No, I think it's for the people. He's giving some joy to the people to wear the brand of the man they support.
Good. Okay. Well, that's confirmed that's okay then. That's good. Also, there's a tenuous link to Max. Well, it's not tenuous. There's a big link to Max with Nelson Pique. He's in the news again because he's been fined for his racial slur against Lewis Hamilton from last year. He's been fined 5 million Brazilian real, which is about $1 million, £750,000. But it's really interesting who's fined him. It's the human rights group amongst some other LGBTQ stuff in Brazil. But what's your view on this? I know you don't like to.
Well, I don't know. They wanted to make an example of him. The trouble with all these things, that the papers never actually write what he actually said, because then that would be saying what they don't like to be heard. It was obviously a racist comment, but I mean, Nelson's a bit like a Jeremy Clarkson. He speaks with his mouth a lot. He's always been controversial, and it's really a reflection that nowadays you just got to be so much more careful. You can't be controversial. You can't risk being controversial. You can't go to the edge, because if you do,
but hang on a minute. There's controversial, and then there's racist. So they're different things. I think being controversial is fine. I think Clarkson is controversial, and I don't think he's racist. I think that's a bit of a difference.
Nelson just says it was a word he used when he was a kid, that apparently everyone was called that word when he grew up, and it came out. But also there's a second one, wasn't it? Something about being homophobic, talking about Lewis versus Rosberg, which I don't know. Again, the quote isn't in the press. I can't judge because I never read the actual quote. But
when we were kids, it was normal. I mean, you're a little bit older than me, but it was normal growing up in the 80s that you say these things. It's normal. It wasn't that.
Yeah, but you've got to be careful.
I know.
Well, it's like, Jeremy did his eeny, meeny, miny, moe thing, and you just got to be. So that was something from our childhood, the way of picking something which you can't say anymore, and understand why. So,
well, you say you understand why. Unless this is a motorsport podcast, but the simple solution surely is not to mention anything. If someone calls you a name, forget it. If somebody says something, forget it. And if we all forget it and stop talking about Black Lives Matter and this, that, and the other, then it's going to resolve the issue.
You're off.
We're all the same.
Motor racing. This is a motor racing podcast.
Okay, how about this blockbuster?
I'm not going to get involved in that Nelson Pique.
This blockbuster, the ADARL, the Abu Dhabi Autonomous Racing League, is launching the biggest autonomous racing league ever, using the Lara Super Formula cars. So they're going to have self-driving cars racing.
How many have they got? They'll run out very quickly. What about that other? That's already been sort of tried and given up about 10 years ago. Robo something.
Robo race that was, and
Robo race. Well, where are they now? They were going to be racing by now. 20 cars on the grid, going around the world.
What's the point? What's the point in this? If you like model stuff, go and drive a remote control car, an RCE or something.
Someone building autonomous road cars maybe is sponsoring it. Who knows? But it won't work.
I don't get it. No, it won't work. Why? What? But what's the point? I don't understand the point. Who's going to benefit from this? The engineers? Because that's all it's going to be. Is it going to? No. Okay.
Well, it's a bit like Formula One. Who benefits in Formula One? The aerodynamicists.
Well, we can talk about Formula One as well, because in terms of the aerodynamicists, they're talking about. I don't know whether you've seen this, but they're talking about cancellation of free practice sessions. Which
no, I haven't seen all that. No, I've just read today. I've tweeted about the rear wing. They decided that the great thing about the Red Bull is it's the design of its rear wing. That when it opens DRS, it's just a clever design. And the article goes on to say how they have wings, 3 different wings for every circuit. It's got a different wing, and I just so wish. I know people don't want to hold the rules down, but I just give them all the same rear wing. That would save millions.
We can't penalise Red Bull for being brilliant.
No, later in the next set of regulations, not now. Obviously, no, you can't take it away in the middle of the season.
Yeah, but when Williams in the 80s were just dominating and winning, Nigel won 8 races in a row, and then what was it, 2014?
Yeah, and they banned the reason he was winning those races.
Okay, what about 2000?
Active suspension. So they let him win that championship, and they took the active suspension away.
When Rosberg and Hamilton were completely dominating in the Mercedes. What about that?
They banned the complex HGU for the next chapter. The next series of regulations is taking out the element of the engine that Mercedes was so ahead of everybody else with. Okay. So they get rid of expensive, clever things like active suspension, like the MGU-H thing, and like rear wings. They're becoming just 3 different types for every circuit, and it spoils the racing. Let's the mechanical engineers sort out suspension a bit more.
I just wish they were hardcore, hard to drive, not so technically advanced.
Okay, let's move straight on from that statement then to NASCAR. Hardcore, hard to drive, but it all went a bit pear-shaped over in COTA. Because it was great, because Jenson Button was having his NASCAR debut late last night, and Kimi Raikkonen was also in the same field. He was already done one before at Watkins Glen. But it was almost an embarrassment to NASCAR in the way I was looking. First of all, what's the name? Viaplay. You lot, what I'm subscribed to every month to watch NASCAR on television, didn't run it on TV. I had to watch it on my computer.
Yeah, but you can stream on television as well.
Onto my little screen.
No, on
someone
TV.
Said I could airplay it. I wasn't going to...
Your TV's about 3 years old. I remember when you got it, the big one in the lounge. So you should be able to stream directly on that TV, YouTube.
Well, I like to go forward at times 12, times 30.
Where's Harry Needell?
He's not at home last night. Anyway, when they go to COTA, and I get upset by the name of that circuit. I have a little... I think it's a horrible name for a track, COTA. Call it Austin or... I don't know, it just niggles me.
It's an abbreviation, of course, Circuit of the Americas.
I know it's an abbreviation, but you shouldn't have abbreviations for names of circuits. Anyway.
What, so you shouldn't call it Spa? You shouldn't call a circuit Spa?
Spa is the name. Spa is
an abbreviation of
Spa-Francorchamps. Francorchamps. It's Francorchamps. The proper name of the track is Spa-Francorchamps. It's just we all get lazy and miss the other bit out.
Exactly. We abbreviate it.
So the NASCAR race. So all the Brits are watching. And it was just, as it always is at COTA, it's the point is you can't put NASCARs onto a Formula One track. This is what's proven time and time again at COTA, because people say, well, that looks ridiculous. Because they get rid of all the track limits. They just say, right, you go wherever you want. Apart from in the middle of the fast S's, they said you can't straight line one of the many S's. So there's dust and dirt and cars going everywhere. And it's this difference between the European, call it European, or the world FIA tracks that are going safer and safer. And what we've had to do is accept runoff limits, track limit penalties. So the way we've gone to make racing as safe as possible is to have flat curbs, tarmac runoffs, the only penalty being time penalties, which drives a lot of us mad. Whereas NASCAR is still a very dangerous sport. They go around next to walls at 200 miles an hour. And when they race on American tracks like Watkins Glen, where else they race? Road America, the best road circuit in the world. They're epic because the track limits there are a narrow curb, a bit of grass, and a barrier. And so they don't go stupid. But at COTA, they look stupid because they were just going everywhere. But Button and Raikkonen, they didn't have a good time. Jenson qualified 24th, managed to get to 18th. Kimi qualified 22nd and slumped to 29th. both actually benefiting or not benefiting in Raikkonen's case from the last time, the end of the race we were talking about, within about 5 restarts. Because Jenson pitted for new tyres and made good restarts, whereas Raikkonen went to the front of the pack for the first restart without changing the tyres. So by not pitting, he started the first restart 4th, I think. But then he slumped back from 4th to 29th. But it was the end of the race that made it look stupid. Kimi's in a good team, Trackhouse, but it was in their 3rd car, so it's not a car regularly used. Jenson was with Rick Ware Racing, it's not one of the front running teams. So no, they didn't have the best cars. But it's interesting, Jenson's story, if you read it, he said he was embarrassed with the first set of tyres. They changed the car, and it oversteered everywhere, and then they worked on this and that. But then he couldn't take the heat. And Jenson Button is one of the fittest athletic Formula One drivers I've known of. Towards the end, he stopped twice for 1 minute pit stops to have ice on the back of his neck poured all over him, because he nearly retired through exhaustion heat. Obviously, the leading cars, they race regularly. They've got their tubes and their air boxes and their cool suits and their more suits.
Well, the ice packs in both doors. You were talking about that last week. Dry ice. Why didn't he have dry ice in the car?
Well, maybe he did. I don't know. He certainly had a cool suit, because I saw him when he was interviewed. He had the veined underwear, so he had a cool suit. But he said
that sounds so wrong. You're looking at veined underwear, you know.
He said it was an emotional roller coaster. The handling, the heat. It was 3.5 hours. But he enjoyed it at the end, because his strategy was good. That he started on fresh tyres and made some good moves on the last. So he finished a respectable 18th, whereas Kimi's strategy didn't work. But it was the end of the race that drove me. It's midnight in England. We're all watching him, trying to get people to follow NASCAR. And they've got the green-white checker system, because it's Mr. Massey's dream that they always race across to the last lap. So, on the ovals, if they have a crash 5 laps for the end, by the time they cleared it up, the actual official race distance is over. So they have a green flag to restart. If they get round to start the second, it's a 2-lap thing, green-white checker. If they get to the white flag, then even if there's a crash after that, they cruise around and the race is over, they've won. So that all seemed all right. But then at COTA, for some reason, it was about 3 or 4 restarts. I can't remember how many. It just looked stupid. They'd actually cleared turn 1, which of course you don't coast this ridiculously tight hairpin at the top of the hill, but they were going 5 and 6 wide. They had a drone shot above, watch them going into this turn. Every time there was someone punted and spun. But the point is, Tyler Reddick, who dominated the race and was really deserved, but he still won it at the end. He was like 3/4 of the way around the green lap when they decided they got to throw the yellow again, because there was some tiredness. So one of the cars that crashed at turn 1 was dragging a bit of rubber halfway around the track, a bit of debris. But the point is, if you let Tyler Reddick get to the white flag, the race is effectively over. You can then go yellow. So once he crossed the line, we knew there was no problem up at turn 1. So why not let him cross the line and then go yellow and finish the race? But instead, we had these 4 restarts where poor old Tyler Reddick was under pressure. If he'd lost the race, it would have been a great injustice. But of course, every restart takes about 3 minutes to get going. So it was a midnight, I think. It would have finished at midnight, and another half an hour was added with these 4 green-white checkers.
Wow.
So, first of all, NASCAR, get your green-white checkers sorted for road course. Because an oval, it's quite a quick reset. Yeah. But when it's a long 4-mile road course, it takes forever for them to cruise around and get ready to restart. So sort out your green-white checkers and don't go to COTA. Don't go to Formula One spec race.
It didn't look right. Tell me, let's go back to the track limits that you just mentioned. So there was no penalty for track limits at all?
Apart from the one turn in the middle of those very fast, it must have been turn 2, 3, 4, about 6.
Why didn't they just literally just ignore the track then and go off onto the... That's ridiculous. That's absolutely... I'm sorry, Tiff, that's ridiculous.
It did look silly. I mean, you've got to put big curbs. I'd go back to bigger curbs. I know there's this dispute between Moto GP riders because the Moto...
Look at Abby Eaton as well. But what happened
but that was a stupid 90-degree curb.
Yeah.
I just mean a proper curb that finishes the corner. Yeah. If you look at I was just looking on Twitter now. There was Estoril with Nigel Mansell Patrese, was going around in the 90s. They just had big curbs,
and they're hard as well, aren't they? You really feel it if you go over it, and that should be the penalty, that you're going to shake the car to bits, or you're going to shake to bits. Yeah. So it wasn't just Jenson Button, one of my heroes, that was knackered. You were knackered, staying up, watching all these restarts.
Yes.
Was it worth it on the Tiffometer?
No, because I got too annoyed. No. It annoyed me. It was still, just to watch those NASCARs being, they were just 4 abreast, 3 abreast, outbraking. Also, the Tiff factor was greatly reduced by the fact that Bubba Wallace T-boned the number 5 of Kyle Larson. And about the 10th lap of a long race, the Larson Peter was dead, and then he eventually retired with a broken rear wheel and stuff. So that the number, because all about NASCAR is following your car. It's a big part. It was quite a good story, because actually Tyler Reddick, it's quite a good story, because Tyler Reddick, who won, switched from his number 8 Chevrolet into this Toyota he's now in. And last year he dominated this race as well. He seems brilliant on road courses, but he was driving his Chevy. But he was punted out on one of these green-white checker restarts. So he was deserving winner last year, but he got taken out. So this year he didn't get taken out. And funny enough, Kyle Busch, who's in Reddick's car now, it's got Reddick's old number 8 for his second. So it was a nice little twist around there, that Reddick won a race he should have won last year, and Kyle Busch came second driving his 8 Chevy.
Where they off to next?
This weekend, they're often back to a proper short track oval, the 3/4 mile. I've got it at the end of the notes for the other thing. Richmond. So back to pucker old NASCAR shoving.
Virginia.
Yeah.
Good.
So, NASCAR, I think you need to rethink going to big race courses that don't suit the cars.
Let's head to a big race course, a very undulating one.
Let's get to proper racing. We should have probably done Moto GP first. It should have, I think, because Jenson Button was in NASCAR, we had to talk about it. Yeah, Moto GP is back, and isn't it wonderful? Wonderful to have it back.
With a bang as well.
Well, yeah, back with more Marc Marquez in plaster again. We'll come to that, because it started with a sprint race. So they had their first ever sprint race on the Saturday.
What did you make of that points and entertainment? In terms of 2 wheels?
It was great, because they didn't change the grid for the main race. It was just a show race for Saturday, 12 laps. And the boys all went for it. They were pushing, shoving, fairing, clashing. They'd used the same grid again for the next day, so you didn't lose anything. You just went for
we lost
points.
A few riders, didn't we?
They went down. No big dramas, actually, the first one that happened made in the main race. But Francesco Bagnaia, who came from nowhere in the middle of the season to take the championship for Ducati last year, dominant second half of the season, continued his dominance, won the sprint race from Spain's Jorge Martin, both on Ducatis. But the story of the sprint was Marc Marquez. So Marquez is back for the first time. I'm fully fit after all these horrendous operations he had on his shoulder or arm. And he was beaming at the end. He was loving it, because the Ducatis are still fast in a straight line, and they've got better aero, with aero now being a dreaded part of bike racing. So he was loving it. He was big. He's got that lovely, smiling, teethy grin. He's always so enthusiastic. And he said, I can catch you when I'm braking. I'm great on braking. My car, my Aspen's braking. And so we all thought, okay, yeah, well, good. And that was a good story. But unfortunately, his enthusiasm for out-braking went the other way in the main race.
You brought it over a little bit, didn't it?
It was a shame. Well, he just went for another move. And very early on, I don't know why he was... It was that turn 2, but it was very tight, tightens up at this wonderful circuit. And he went down the inside. Who was it? He went down the inside of...
Martin.
They hit, your Jorge Martin.
Yeah.
But Martin did slightly pull out to look like he wanted to overtake the bike in front, which was Miguel Oliveira. And that might have put, that's his own excuse.
He's even put his hand up himself and apologised. He said, it's my fault. And
he smashed Jorge Martin's leg, didn't put him down, and then just T-boned Portugal's home hero, Miguel Oliveira on Aprilia. And in the end, it's actually, he's only battered and bruised, I think, Oliveira. I haven't had an update today. With Marquez has broken his thumb or something.
Marquez isn't well liked, isn't he, about that? He's almost
apologised to the crowd. He sort of, did he's now missing Argentina. So yet again, he won't do a full season. So he's enthusiastic.
Is he the Max Verstappen of the motorbike world? Because
he is.
I looked on Twitter and people saying, same again, lunging. And I'm not saying...
He's getting desperate to get back to his winning ways, and he hasn't got the bike to do it. So he's just, trying to make the Honda do things, and his only place he can sort of battle is to outbrake people. And
lunging is the worst thing, because you're trying to do the right thing as a racing driver, and then you get some absolute, I'm not even going to say, but coming up the inside of you, you think, oh, what are you doing? But yeah.
Anyway, end up with another win for our champion. So Bagnaia won again the main race. He was kept honest all the way through by Spain's Maverick Vinales in the Aprilia, who qualified 7th. So it was a great run for Vinales. And third was another satellite Ducati by Marco Bezzecchi. It was actually a brilliant battle for 4th. The top 3 were a bit spread out towards the end. Only, by bike length or 2, they're all keeping the pressure on. It was amazing. 4th to 9th were covered by about half a second, I think. There was the Frenchman Johan Zarco came through, another Ducati, satellite Ducati, to claim 4th. But Jack Miller was on a KTM doing great stuff. He led a bit the sprint race, I think, because he's been dropped by Ducati. So Jack Miller had a good time. The 2 KTMs, I think, were about 5th and 6th or 6th and 7th. So plenty of action in MotoGP. And of course, you get 3 races with Moto. You get the Moto 2s. We've now got 3 Brits in Moto 2. Because who was it? Rory Skinner's joined Jake Dixon and Sam Lowe's. Although Rory did a couple of races, I think, last year. Just did 2 rounds last year, wasn't it? He was our British super sports champion, winning 10 races in 2020. He's now done 2 years of superbikes, British, 7 podiums, no wins. So Rory Skinner, he's 22 years old, I think. So youngster coming up. But Jake Dixon, we really hoped might be a challenger this year for the championship. Qualified disappointing 12th, but got through to 6th. And Sam Lowe's qualified 9th and came to the 7th. So not the greatest of results for the British boys in the opening round. And the race won by someone I think might dominate this year, our great Moto 3 superstar, Pedro Acosta, raced to a fairly controlled win. And of course, he had an injury in the middle of the last year, his first year in Moto 2. He broke his leg when they go out testing, mucking about on motorbikes in the dirt bike, training. They call it training. What it is a bit of away from the track, mucking about.
Having fun.
So Pedro Acosta looking very much a favourite for Moto 2. Moto 3, our 2 Brits from last year, and then their Vision Track Racing came back. We thought this was the year they'd move up the grid. But despite some good testing results in the winter, Scott Ogden only qualified 20th and crashed on the first lap, which he had a habit of doing last year when he was getting desperate when things weren't working well. So that's a very big disappointment for him to drop out. And Josh Watton, the other driver, was 24th rider, qualified 24th, finished 21st. But it was a lovely crowd. It was a crazy, as always, Sunday morning. It's usually about 10 o'clock in the morning, it's on. It's lovely. They start early in Moto GP, which I enjoy, because I think the actual Moto GP is like 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock, and then you've got the afternoon to do the gardening, whatever. But it was 10 bikes.
You couldn't do that at Silverstone, because you'd have the afternoon getting out of Silverstone in all the traffic.
I mean, watch you on the telly.
Yeah,
Spain's Daniel Holgado won from another Spain. It's all Spanish, isn't this MotoGP? David Minos second, David. But a Brazilian, Diogo Morieri, the first Brazilian to ever be on a podium in Moto 3, apparently. But yeah, fabulous, just fabulous entertainment.
It's always the Spanish, isn't it? Spanish, Italians. Yeah, they do seem to dominate quite a lot, and they're
small. You have to be small. That's the trouble with us.
They're like
big
jockeys,
lads. Jake Dixon's almost too tall, and we've all our heroes.
I've never been called a big lad before, Tiff. I'm quite chuffed with that.
Yeah, you should have been a bike racer. You're perfect size. Get down behind that fairing, get a little bottom out the back, tuck down.
Not with this gut anymore, but anyway, they're off to Argentina next week, which takes us to Formula E. What do you make of that this weekend? Jaguar dominated, didn't they?
I know. Well, it's becoming a bit like Formula One. Formula E, because they call it an energy management contest. They admit that's it. And so I sometimes call it a slow bicycle race. And it really did look like one in this Sao Paulo track. Well, because it was a lot of straights. So if you lead, the slipstream now is so important for conserving energy. So the guy out front doesn't want to be out front when there's not a lot of corners, because he can't regen. So the leaders were backing off. And the second place was sort of coming alongside him, but not wanting to overtake him. And the third place was coming alongside. And no, I don't overtake. It was a slow bicycle race. I don't want to lead. I'm going slower. But they wouldn't overtake. But at the end of the day, as I said, it's been like Formula One, because It's which powertrain has got the computer programming right for the particular circuit. Because we started the season off, the first 3 races were won by Porsche drivetrains, both the Porsche team and Jake Dennis's Andretti team that run the Porsche powertrain. Then we had Penske came strong, Jean-Eric Verne, won by blocking really successfully the Penske powertrain. And all the time, the Jaguar powertrains kept on showing promise but not getting the result because they've got the Envision team. So there's 4 cars for the Jaguar powertrain. Although Porsche came back in round 5, Jaguar finally got it right this weekend. And although their 4th car was stuck down in 10th, the 3 Jaguar power just cruised at the front towards the end because their computer management system gave their drivers, more energy, better energy management. In fact, they sort of came in 2 by 2s because the Jaguars were first, second, and third. Then there were 2 Porsches with their management computer program. Then there were 2 Penskes with their management program. And then the 2 McLarens with their management program. So although all the drivers are the best in the world, they could only drive to the computerized program. And so it's much more like Formula One, down to the I don't know, obviously not aerodynamicists. They're what's an electrician? Down to the electricians, the computer managers. So it was a bit of a weird race, and I don't know. Jake Dennis got taken out by
another bloke.
Oh, troubled British bloke, always in trouble.
Simon.
No. Why do I start stories? I always forget. This is what age does to you. You should remember. Tictum, Dan Tictum.
Oh, Dan.
Tictum clobbered, but Tictum said his brakes didn't work because the track was a bit dirty offline. So he went offline trying to overtake, and he came down and he T-boned Jake. So there's a bit of controversy between 2 of our Brits. But it was interesting. See, if you're just watching it as a punter and you see these cars going around nose to tail and overtake, because sometimes people will just overtake 3 cars. Well, I'm fed up with this lifting off. I'll just overtake them. So it looks like the masses of overtakes.
Oh,
it's
a bit like in Formula One. All this overtaking.
I know in Twitter. You're a statistician. When I talk about Formula One being boring, you'll find there were 33% more overtakes in 2022 than there were in 2021. The fact that they're all DRS overtakes, so they're all done in the pits when someone's tire changing. When you try to make the number of overtakes justify a certain formula, you are barking up the wrong tree.
It's got to be exciting, and it's got to be flat out racing. It's got to be on the limit.
They'll quickly tell you, Formula One isn't always flat out. You'll find people, sports cars isn't always. No, they're not always flat out. And yes, there will be elements of periods of races where you've got to conserve something, but not.
Yeah, but very minimal, very minimal. You would conserve your tyres, or if Max is 45 seconds in front of Checo for second place. The motorbikes are always flat out. They wouldn't be ones for conserving tyres.
No, not on the bikes. No. I don't know. They might, but again, the engineer, you see, half the engineers they don't start Formula One races with a full fuel tank because they want to start 2 kilograms lighter.
Yeah,
because the computer says you'll do the race if you have slightly less fuel. Maybe the bikes, because the tank's high up in the centre of gravity, maybe the bikes do occasionally run a little less fuel than they allow. But I've never known anyone run out. Maybe once I can remember MotoGP running out of fuel. Anyway, so a weird set of races from NASCAR to Moto GP to Formula E was the only circuit stuff of international stature. But this weekend coming, whoa!
Well, no. We got international stature. It was the kickoff of the Caterham Championship this weekend. No,
that's not international stature.
Well, it is because we've got German drivers. They've got German drivers. They're international. And I just wanted to say,
races aren't made of international stature by the competitors in the race. It is
no, and they go this year. They're going to Zandvoort and Spa. That's bloody national.
And where did it kick off? At a sprint track in the Midlands.
It did. Okay, so it wasn't a race; it was a sprint track. But I want to say that well done to Callum from Overdrive. He's the new media driver. He bloody won it. He went and bloody won it, didn't he?
No. Who was that other bloke? There was the big media bloke that
but if you want to compare times, he's obviously got a much. If you want to compare times, we're still on top.
He had an easy win, did he?
I'm not saying anything. No, but he's obviously a very good driver. They do lots and lots of cool stuff. So I'm looking forward to watching him this weekend. And the big boys, hardly the big boys, but Joe, Fred, all the guys
Yeah.
that I did the last 2 seasons with. They're at Alton Park. Yeah.
Well, this weekend.
This weekend, first.
Okay. So the main
April's...
motor race meeting internationally this weekend are Caterham's at Alton Park. There is a secondary interest down in Australia where there's, Melbourne. If you're down in Melbourne, what a treat. You've got Formula 1, there. Formula 2, Formula 3. Amazing. And you've got the Aussie Porsche Super Cup. You've got the Aussie Supercar racing. 4 days of incredible racing down in Melbourne, which I'm really looking forward to catching up on. Well, Moto GP, as we said, go over to Argentina. A weird track, almost in the middle of the whole continent of South Africa.
South Africa, Argentina's
South America. It begins with an A and it's a South. Indy cars get back to their first speedway of the year, 1.5 mile banked Texas Speedway. And NASCAR go back to their roots with a real old bullfight around the 3/4 mile Richmond Raceway. So a wonderful variety of motorsport around the world that we'll be reporting on
international. And we're going to kick off with Kerbera. No, we're not. We're at Alton Park. But no, wish them all well. And thanks for joining as always.
International. I'm off to test my Cortina now at Goodwood, ready for the Goodwood members meeting. Now that's international for you. Cheers.
Cheers.